So next, leader of opposition.
Today's government creates dictatorship-wide machine, right? They deprive people's the ability to participate in politics, people's ability to voice out their discriminatory situation, and also that deprive the people's ability to think about what kind of situation is better for their condition. We say that as long as there's a room of the people to consider to improve their condition, that is much better, even though we somehow agree upon the ability of intelligence. So first, the stance of opposition today. We are happy to use the AI opinion, like such as the TV show can show AI saying that kind of opinion or AI's data saying that kind of thing. However, an important point here is that as final decision should be left on the people, because as long as we take the democratic process and final decision are left on the people, there is room for people to participate in politics and decide what condition should be the best for them. That kind of work we are support. So, three issues to talk. First of all, I want to talk about AI is not always good dictatorship. That is a whole assumption with their side of heart. And second of all, even though the AI is somehow good, they are considering the ability to make the choice. We say humor is much better. And lastly, I'd like to talk about the depriving people's ability to participate in politics is the unjust considering the importance of democracy. So, first issue later. So first issue, we say that this policy creates dictatorship by AI. Their assumption is that dictator is always good and think for human. However, we say this is not true because the AI is of course created by human being, right? That means the algorithm is also determined by human being. How to think is also programmed by the certain scientists. That means the concept of intelligence or how to think is taught by human. Of course, unconsciously they teach the aggression or they have the sense of domination is a pleasure. They might have that kind of negative aspect or selfishness of human being. Therefore, of course, that's actually true that one AI that actually clearly they declare that I'm gonna kill, I'm gonna sway up all human beings. That kind of the tragedy might be happen because the algorithm or human negative aspect is also reflected on the AI. And second of all, when AI gonna go too far and start dominating the human being, the human cannot tackle down that kind of dictatorship. Why? Because as long as they told you, the human thinks that is natural. We don't think about anything. That kind of situation makes human stupid, right? Because the human doesn't have to think what kind of condition is better, what is human right. They totally think about this kind of things for 10 years or 20 years. They lose the concept of human rights. They lose the concept with choice or democracy. On that occasion, even AI start killing you and using massive destruction weapon. The human just putting the discriminatory situation, just accept it. That is the awful situation in their state of house. And then, second of all, even though AI is not such a bad dictatorship, we say human can make the better decision. That is the second argument. Because first, the machine is unfortunately not so flexible, right? Because they are always make decision depends on algorithm or program that they already made by the scientists. That means when they make decision, they push one value which is programmed by their AI, and that means such as they think the higher income is always good, the higher participation in universities is always good. That's kind of the objective, using objective measure, they push one value. That means, like, when there's a very tiny exception in the individual case, that the need that is out of the algorithm, those kind of the needs or demand, the AI cannot achieve that kind of the property. Like, for example, if one Muslim pious believer believe that even you do not go to the school, even you just stay home, that is ultimate happiness for you. I'm just stay here and I want to devote for God. Those are subjective happiness or inflexible happiness that AI cannot achieve or that kind of thing. They just say we can put an update and telling a new value or so forth. However, the problem is there is a massive amount of exceptional case in our society, and there is massive technology or massive problems are emerging every right second, right? Like for example, for example, in construction area, of course, there's many technology, and also at the same time, the many discrimination does occur. They have to prove if they can just update and we can create the perfect AI. How they can see that? How they can create the new algorithm that tackle the newly emerging the problem or so forth. On that point, we say humor is much better because they can democratic way, they can find the necessity to help people, and they can think consider individual case. If one people pursue the subjective case, we accept that and we accept that kind of the value of individual.
If human choice is everything and humans are always right, are you going to allow murder, crime, or any kind of action that might be bad?
Yes, we agree that some humans make mischoice, right? However, that kind of the mistake we can occur, compensate or deter that kind of the return. Like for example, if people are so greedy or selfish, we can enough to deter by the punishment or criticize, or we can provide moral education or so forth. Those kind of deterrence enough to create that a happiness democratic society. So last issue, why that is unjustifiable to deprive people's choice of representation. The point is, in our side, people can have the final decision, right? That means they can pursue their own happiness. They can voice up their own problem in the society. Compared to that, in their side of the house, machine just push the one side of value, such as the higher income or those kind of vacation. The problem is, if people, the receiver of politics, cannot voice up, we cannot confirm that kind of value of machine corresponding to the value of human being or value of individual. There is a strong problem. And the more we say that the machine are often to kick out the emotional problem or kick out subjective happiness, such as religion or such as their family value or so forth. Compared to that, because we are human, we can understand the emotion of others and we can sympathize those kinds of minority or vulnerable people or religious people as well. Therefore, we can more flexible and justifiable adjust our politics, form of politics in order to the individual happiness. We are so-called sons of opposition today.
Thank you, leader of opposition. So next, Deputy Prime Minister.
till this motion has assumed the existence of this machine. The choice among individuals was something of course of nature. We couldn't make a decision, we couldn't have a priority. But when this machine came into existence, a new choice faces the humankind. When we have this choice to allocate things better, in a sense that we're engaged into the characteristic of how AIs are promulgated in later sense, when that choice happens, is it okay for society to just ignore that value decision and just let on people making the decision freely at the expense of other people? Or as a society, have we always been functioning when we can compare rights and when rights are being clashing and we can make a moral judgment or rational judgment on comparing those rights? Do we continue our matter in this sense? We think a responsible society is not to just throw away the burdens and just say free choice is absolutely important. We think when we always made laws to restrict rights, when we always try to restrict rights among people, we think the next course of action, should a machine like this exist, is to use this machine to decide rather than use people's free will. So that's the extension coming from the Deputy Prime Minister. In a sense, when this comparison exists among individual rights, first, should individuals be allowed to make that choice in direct clash with opening options argument that's saying individuals are always the ones who have to make the choice at the end? And second of all, as a responsible society, which is the better choice to prioritize? Subjective values that human beings might have or calculatable, accountable values that this machine provides with us? But before moving on to the extensions from Deputy Prime Minister, some arguments that I want to kick out in this argument case of assuming about AI. First, opening option assumes that this AI is somehow going to be malevolent and is going to be a human-created thing and has limits. If we want to create an AI and if it's about practicality, we can't make this AI. It's never going to exist. It's not about how human beings are going to make these kind of things. We rather think this AI is probably going to be something that has its own self-made consciousness. It can learn for itself. It has a strong AI. It's not decided from doctrine or human-decided algorithms. And we think this AI goes beyond that transcendence and able to assume those kind of things. But moreover, so it's an assuming motion. We don't want to debate on how this AI is working. But rather more, if they say this AI is something that bad, why do they use it in side opposition as any kind of metric to justify their stance? Please tell us, if it's such a problematic thing, why do you even consider using this problematic item existing in society? Then they talk about AI taking control of the world. They never told what incentive AI has. Terminator is unrealistic. It's probably better to coexist with human beings. Again, that's another red herring argument, which is really irrelevant in today's debate. So the conclusion of this refutation to side opening option is, please judges, this is not a motion of how we make AIs. This is not we can't debate how to make an AI. As a science person, we don't think that's possible. Moving to the arguments of comparing the rights, because the important consumption coming from opening option was two things. First is that individuals are at the end of the day who are the ones who have to make the right. And second, we have to prioritize subjective values, for example, religion or democracy or those kind of things. We know, first of all, for the case of why we have to prioritize democracy, as another refutation to the side, democracy or those kind of instruments we already have in society are measures for us to make a better society in the balance of allocation of resources. We have elections and we choose politicians to allocate resources and allocate these kind of things. And the politicians, which they kind of make laws, are sometimes imposing to us. So even for democracy, we always allow some other entity to dictate among us. This is just another extension of democracy or those kind of values already existing in society. So setting aside with those reputations. So there's a different kind of clash existing in today's debate. Because as we have clarified from Prime Minister, no, thank you, this is not a debate of a society suddenly transitioning into a society like with a machine or not. It's a principal debate comparing these kind of things. So in options world, or in the current world we're already living right now, we can't compare the many rights or many clashing existing in society. For example, who gets to go into which school? Sometimes it's dictated by uncontrollable, probably unfair characteristics as where you have been born or how much money you've had, which is completely irrelevant of what you're going to achieve through those goals. But we think it is irresponsible when we have this machine to allocate, keep on allocating just because in the name of individual rights. Why is this so hard? Two reasons. No, thank you. So why can't, first of all, individual make that choice? Even in our society, we never allow those individuals to make ultimate moral judgment among these kind of things. Because as I pointed out in the prior point of information, if individual choice is everything, if individuals should be able to decide anything for themselves, we don't have laws restricting individual choices. We particularly have laws that restrict individuals' rights, because we recognize if we allow this individual to have that unfettered free choice, it starts restricting other individuals' society that right. So we don't think it's acceptable for us to just say individuals' choice are better. We have to think, if there's a clash of individual choice existing in society, what is the best way to clash? In a side options world, it's going to be power-based politics. It's going to be biased politics, which are probably going to be marginalizing the poor people existing in society, which are bad against those individuals. Rather, on the government side, we have those policies where this dictated by these kind of machines, and it's going to be allocated on the total utility of society. And government opposition side cannot save the benefit when they just say they're going to use the machine. Because ultimately, the human beings are going to be the ones who are deciding. There is no reason, if the reason is what they want to talk about, the white people entrenching values in society, they have no reason to tell us why those people will be absolutely dictating in that sense. So the conclusion of the first analysis on how should individuals make a choice is that individuals can have a free extent of free choice till the extent we can start regulating that choice in comparison with other people. And we have this machine. We think it's unfair for society to keep on this choice existing. We rather want to restrict it, and that's why we don't want human values to enter that sphere. Closing.
So AIs, even if they're strong, are merely algorithmic predictions and have statistical error rates that are inevitable. How do you justify coercion into the existence of a few percentages of an error rate?
Here. I think if the case of error ranges, they think it's more justifiable for people to rely on that machine, which is trying to be beneficial for you in every kind of sense, versus a society which is sometimes based against the black minorities, sometimes biased against the LGBT minorities. If there is going to be an allocation risk happening existing, we would rather want that to happen just by mistake rather than entrenched values existing in society and those kind of things. Moving on to the second point of comparison, the second kind of contention coming from opening option, which is that we want to prioritize subjective values such as religion or those kind of things. But we have to consider another thing. As a society, we've already told you, we don't value these ideas as something absolute and something that could overcome other people's identities. Because the choice these people are making in this kind of thing is no small choice. It's which school you're going to go or which company you're going to have. We don't think those kind of rights should be infringed by another person's subjective right to the extent that you're going to probably be wasting your values. You're going to be probably wasting your future. We don't think people have a responsibility to fit into that subject value and have to respect other people's subject value in that sense. That's why when those subject values are clashing too, we think it's rather beneficial. Because on the other hand, subjective values clash too. Islam and Christianity, they both clash. Where's the ultimate decision? We think in that instance, the ultimately fair decision is to let this machine decide which is more practical for the society. So the conclusion of the extensions coming from Deputy Prime Minister is, yes, subjective values or individual choice was important in the past society. But when we have this machine, and when that choice has become a choice of the past, we think it's responsible for us to make that choice as we allocate it with any other choice. We compare the rights of existing societies, and then we compare the rights based on fairness. That's why we want to introduce this machine. That's why we propose this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. So next, dialogue.
Mr. Madam Speaker, the opening government came up and said that people's lives are going to be determined by how productive they are. And we think that's a very bad society. Because if you're like, for example, not really skillful, that means you're not going to have a very good life. You're not going to have a good job or those kind of things. And we think that like maybe like people, if we are not productive at all, they're not even gonna give like human rights or like rights to actually live, because giving them that much of resources is a waste of money or waste of time. Using that resources, maybe they can use it for other people to like save more people. That's the kind of logic that they were talking about. We don't understand why to that extent they are wanting to like protect productivity in the first place. And we think that like the value in whether like what is a good life? It's not like dependent on the productivity, or it depends on like the value of each individual, and we don't understand why AI can actually like predict like each individual's value and be able to allocate like the best choices of life from that. So that is why we're very happy to oppose this motion. So I'm going to talk about two things in my speech. Firstly, I want to more clarify when do people reject the life determined by machine intelligence, and secondly, I want to talk about when conflict between like the productivity and individual happiness happen, what should government prioritize. But before moving on to my point, I have refutation to their side of the house. So firstly, like they said that if we take this proposal, the productivity of society is so good, so the society is at peace. Well, firstly, like we told you that if people actually want to be productive, we think those people will opt into those like productivity kind of life, even in our paradigm. So we think that like majority of the people who want to like, we think a lot of people actually want to like pursue their career or want to have like a good job or those kind of things. So if the machine is able to like tell them that your life is better if you go to like this school, we think that those people would actually opt in and take into the machine's idea. So we think that in cases of the worldwide society, we think majority of people are very happy to like opt in to those kind of situations if they say that productivity is one of the greatest value in the world. So we think that in as a whole, we think maybe there's going to be like less war or like less like exploitations in the long run. But we think like that like what they're gonna sacrifice are the people who doesn't care about productivity. Maybe they want to have like a fun life, they want to do like games all their lives, or like or they want to have like devote themselves in like religion, or even if they're really bad at doing something, they just love doing maybe art, even if they really have no like artistic talent. We think that those kind of value in life is something that is also precious. They never told you why those things are not precious at all. And secondly, they talked about, or we're talking about like AIs that are like strong and they can learn from themselves, and humans are not the ones who actually control the AIs at all. And if they're saying that humans are not going to control the AI, we think that like the idea coming from Shaw about like AI being like very disruptive might happen because the criteria of productivity is very, very vague. Maybe if the productivity is about human, maybe they want to say more human, but if it's about like maybe Earth, maybe like erasing human in itself is much more better for like the Earth like productivity. I don't know, but so we don't understand why in their side like the humans are gonna actually have a better life in the first place.
Point.
No, and thirdly, like the opposition government side talked about how like because there's a limited amount of resources, that's why some people have to go to other places that they don't want to go to, and that's something bad. But we think that the limited amount of resources isn't both paradigm. There are people who maybe are not going to have like the best lives ever, even in their size, and we don't understand how like those kind of things are going to change. We think poor people are still going to exist if there is a limited amount of resources. They are not really something. They are not be able to be very comparative. So now I'd like to move on to my point. First, I want to talk about when do people reject the life determined by machine intelligence. So if we can see that a lot of people actually care about productivity, but we are telling that, firstly, that not all people actually agree to it, and secondly, we think that like we think that the machines are not able to actually calculate and recognize everyone, and we think that in itself is something that those are the actors that are really influenced in this debate. The opening government talked about we're happy to like update data, and because the AI can learn from itself, and it's going to be okay. But we think that to learn and update, you have to actually identify the problem. That those people, those kind of minority does not fit in the algorithm that we have already. And we think it's difficult. They have never told you how they're going to learn or how they're going to identify that some people does not fit in the algorithm. So that's why we think that in their side, like if some people does not like fit in the algorithm, they're actually going to be put in a life that they do not really, that it does not fit for them, or those kind of things. We think in our side, even if those kind of things happen, we can be flexible about it, and maybe flexible. And we think that update is something that is difficult. Like even if you look at the current law system, it's difficult to update certain laws because it's difficult to identify problems. For example, maybe like, problems of like gay marriage. Maybe people didn't recognize that gay individual wanted to have like marriage rights, or those kind of things. It's something that's really difficult to identify and actually solve. Close.
If the context is where there is horrible bias toward minority, maybe that artificial intelligence also reflect that bias, right? This artificial intelligence have authority over people, right? What the distinction between your side and our side in terms of that point?
Firstly, if we think that the science is made by people who are very intelligent and people who have a lot of power in society, so we don't understand how this power, maybe like the white people, dominant rich people, are able to identify the problem of the minority people. We think that in itself is maybe it will be disruptive. Maybe like the rich people will actually utilize the AI and they will have maybe like the power structure that government side is saying is going to increase because of the rich people who are the ones who actually make those machine intelligent. So secondly, I want to talk about when there's a conflict between the productivity and individual happiness, which should government actually prioritize? So first, we already told you that productivity in itself doesn't really change, and it is a very minute like benefit the government side is selling. But even in those kind of cases, we think that we should not step into people's choices. We think that like after all, they are not like doing because there are firstly like there are alternatives way to actually make people productive, and secondly, we think that the individuals does not have the responsibility to actually like taking care of other people's lives. They have the right to actually pursue their happiness. We don't understand why the government is actually making individuals responsible for other people's life are very happy to close.
Thank you, DLO. So next, member of government.
Madam Chair, we think it is not enough for opposition side to like vaguely describing the utility as simple words and neglecting the reality. You know what? Like obviously, the 1 million yen is subsidized to every single student in medical college, but nonetheless, these students, by their own free will, neglect the set it up career and abandon their subsidy that has been invested upon them. We think that's problematic because at the end of the day, we live in a world where with the limited resources and limited human resources. We think that ended up the disaster situation where all people in the society were stopped. Extension coming from the closing opposition, closing government is two things. Firstly, how the so I want to talk about how the free will, the assumption coming from the entire opposition bench does not simply exist, and secondly, why this policy leads to breaking the barrier, and why the minorities that has been systematically stigmatized can raise up the society, raise up their the social ladder, and thirdly, as I already told you before in the introduction, how the free will has systematically worsened up the entire society by abandoning the numbers and amount of social utility, and why the individuality is not the priority of the government to respect. So before that, several responses. First, opening opposition. First, we have to recognize opening opposition clearly got forced because their case is so much narrow. So they talk about the politics, like policy making is maybe bad policy gonna make. But they ignore the setup OG. We're not talking about the politics. We are talking about the ordinary individual making an ordinary lifestyle choices for themselves. And secondly, more importantly, it is not our burden. So we want to defend the failing AI. If the AI is so pragmatic, we are like changing the system by setting a committee by minority. And secondly, even if in the worst, best case scenario, sit down, open opposition, if society is so biased, so discriminatory, how does just having information by AI is so much important to you, so much successful to you? You have to negotiate with your misogynist parents if you want to, as a girl, if you want to be like engineer whatsoever. We think that is not feasible if you take the best case context, we think that they lack a comparative. Secondly, more importantly, there are already so many systems. Secondly, they said like free will is important, but however, there are already so many systems to balance out the utility and individuality. We have a job application, job test, that we have entrance exam in college. All people, all students, all high school students want to go to the Tokyo University, but they have to pass the test because there is a social utility to invest in a particular university by the government and the individuality which will be flourished by go to the university. Therefore, we think that already individuality is compromised by so many circumstances. If you want a free will, if you also get hardcore on the free will, you have to oppose entire the existing system in the very first step. We think that is insane. No, thank you. First, why free will does not exist? That is directly clashing with the assumption. So their bizarre assumption is everyone can choose the best and they get satisfied. Four responses. Firstly, they neglect the entire existing system with like job application and interest in the university. And secondly, individual choice is fundamentally biased. If you're a woman or a girl in patriarchal society, from the beginning of their childhood, your parents will tell you you're not good at a job or math or sports whatsoever. You shouldn't go to work, but rather care for family and stay in home. We think this kind of bias was entrenched exists in the very first place. Individuals are not able to exercise their free will. Third, no thank you. When it comes to a job or education, there is a system which systematically distorts your individual calculus. It is a culture. It is a media narrative. It is maybe the cram school in Japan, which brainwash their students as if you do not go to the Tokyo University, you're a makegumi, you're a loser, you're a dog ass. We think that is pragmatic. This kind of institutionalized the bias with something loser agency. So they say like just give it information, but the information is not successful if you take in the best context where systematically society are biasing you within that premise. Sit down. Secondly, the breaking the barrier. We think this is important because we live in a society very few in STEM faculty, white family's income is 5 times higher than black counterparts, and number of LGBTQ soldiers were denied by administration to serve their country. These discriminations are conducted and entrenched by free will. Because people, by their own free will, internalize society or no. Because by their own free will, you believe you are not qualified to begin with, by your own identity. We think that AI is something and only way to break this norm. Why that's so? Because if machine simulate a woman, a girl enters a certain university and become a great engineer, the machine will decide women to become, go to that university to be an engineer in the very first place. This is the only moment when society or tell their conception, a misconception, believing women are not qualified, it's bad. We think this is important thing and this is the only way. Because society, unless they are told by the higher authority like intelligence, they do not turn up, rectify their own belief. We think this is the only way. Yes, defend yourself.
The reason of not being able to maybe take some free choices in status quo is societal structure. You said it, but if societal structure is a reason, like if we're happy to eradicate it, it's not like something.
How that is possible in the very So we live in a world. At least you need so many mechanisms. 15 seconds is not enough. So we think more importantly, this breaking up the norm is important because this redistribution and rectifying the social problem will accelerate. Because firstly, people will more qualified people go to the place and more productivity increase. This means that secondly, more increase in capital to invest something like affirmative action or student loan or maybe the minority with caring policy. Moreover, thirdly, more people who are more incentive to listen to the left-wing politician to appeal to the left-wing policy. This increase of productivity makes society more benevolent to minority and poor people in the very first place. Thirdly, how individuals should systematically harm and is not priority. What they fail to prove to us opening opposition is why individuality is utmost priority. This is crucial because neo-level AI individuality has significantly harmed society. You know what? $2 billion, millions and millions of dollars are invested and get wasted by injecting the wrong people. But realize this why individuality harms society. Because you invest the faculty to the wrong person, you invest scholarship to the wrong person, you're bailing out the failing corporation. We think all this money can be go to the pockets of individuals who need a home, who need a rent, who need a dying, who want to save the dying people, loving people, by giving them Medicare. All this money can be used to these poor people. But get this, why in these circumstances individuality does matter, despite of people are dying? It is objectively bad. Dying also, of course, is objectively bad. What subjective dreams or choice is important rather than saving the dying people? We proudly propose this motion.
Member of government. So next, member of opposition.
This speech will be somewhat similar to some people who have listened to it. 2 points of extension. One, on why the pursuit of resource and utility is a non-exclusive issue, that we also achieve that in the world of choice and the information that AI provides. Second, that their world is a coercive world that denies the liberty of people to choose the communities they associate to, the individuals that they want to marry, or the jobs they want to choose, or the education and the path they want to choose. It is denied. That generally people would go on with the choice of the AI, but for those who don't think that AI is right, or those who are in the trap or being facing the error of the AI being told the wrong choice, is these people are denied of their life because they simply are coerced by these AI and if they have no option at all. Just one point of rebuttal before I go on with that. So they come up with this idea that free will is bad because there are discriminatory regions in our society and parents are misogynistic and often don't allow women, their daughters, to go on to STEM choices. One, we think that in the abundance of resources, and generally because this system would give these daughters or children the education opportunity, who to marry to, or the job, that full course of life. We think these women daughters can just escape from that family, and society, and this infrastructure is can obviously protect them. There's no saying that this daughter has to stay in that area because probably there are these schools that these daughters were determined to go, which is probably geographically distinct from this discriminatory area. So you've dealt with it. But also, it's not really clear whether they would be really happy with the choice of the AI, deprived of agency, deprived of actual will of the individual. We think that it's often a miserable one, but at least it's not given that utility is not something that we're willing to accept, unjustifiable. So, on why the pursuit of resource and utility is non-exclusive. Ocean sees these ideas generally that when you allow the AI to choose, it's that you have a so functional society, resources are there, poverty is going to probably diminish, you have a wonderland. And CZ also goes on with saying that beautiful allocation of scholarships or things like that. Those aren't exclusive, because even on our side of the house, we can allow this AI to show what is good for individuals. Like we can make it free for individuals to get access to that information. And generally, because individuals want to have an enjoyable and satisfactory and talented life, they would go on with that choice. And there are very few subset of individuals who don't want that, which I want to point out that 95% or maybe a bit less, but 90% of individuals would go on with the choice of the AI. That means that the utility of awesome researchers to research, or so many developments done or things like that, will be done on a 90% level, not distinct from their side of the house. The question is whether that 10%, which they haven't substantiated as an importance of, is really important. Because they don't really test what this utility is, to what extent that utility is important, probably because it's going to be a drastically developed society with this AI, with so much allocation of resource becoming more efficient. Probably we have abundance of resource where we can deal with issues even if we lose 10% of it. I don't understand the importance of the loss of 10%. No, thank you. But the other important thing is that AIs unfortunately do make errors. They also mean that they can make 95% accurate choices, but it's unfortunate that they definitely do make 5% errors. And in that 5% error, it's a misallocation of individuals, resources, or untalented individuals in certain professions. That's a force or the coercion and probably that means that it's not that 100% versus 90%, but it's rather that 90% versus probably the same 90% or 95%. So on the grounds of exclusivity of resource, there's not really a clear distinction. At least you can't clearly say that either is better. So that issue, all the benefits that at least OG was substantiated on to justify the harm principle or to justify killing the OO was already killed by the clarification of the context where it brings you from closing option. So the point is that we do concede that they might be a bit more efficient, but this bit of 2-3% of its efficiency, whether it's worth it for coercing individuals, is a question that we want to raise. And we think that individual rights at stake are hugely important, because we want that where the second extension comes in. Because, but before I go on, sure.
So when you believe that 90% of society will probably going to be happy with it, why are you okay for the another 10% to take away that because they want to be a greedy CEO or because they want to just actualize themselves?
Because I already told you that in the abundance of resources, which is probably drastically different from the 2017 of today, and loss of the 10% is probably not important, but at least you haven't substantiated that lack of 10% being so substantial. So that's something you haven't dealt with, and that's why you're dead. So why is the right of individuals important? Because what sort of educational path you go on with, what spouse you choose, to what sort of job you go on with, which probably consumes 60% of your lifetime, is collectively your choice and your determination of a destiny from childhood to death. It's determining who you are, what you are, and it's ultimately, in our modern society, about pretty much deciding what you ultimately are as an individual, as a collective, in the 80 years of a lifetime. And ultimately, unfortunately, there are individuals who are jeopardized, not the individuals who are not of the 95%. No, thank you. That there are people who don't prefer the choice of the AI, that they want to be other things. That AI told them to be a good researcher in AI, but they rather wanted to be a philanthropist or something like that. Or it might be that the error rate was an issue. They were told they would be an awesome doctor, but that was a lie. But they think that they should be a doctor, and they continuously fail in the path, but they can't change their options. That is locking people into that system and denying their individuality, and it's simply not worth a bit of a 2-3% of increase of resources that they only have able to substantiate. But it's important to understand that in a world where these people are locked into so they wanted to be something, but they can't, and they're continuously suffering from that. They have to be forced to marry a person that they don't like to, and they can't really change that, or they're forced to go on with an education that they don't really want to learn with. When states exist for the welfare of individuals and respecting their dignity, to force people to go on with the life that they do, that they're not satisfied with, or simply that they abhor, it's simply denying their dignity as a basic individual. And I think that to the extent that there's no ground of comparative that they want that they substantiate, this 2-3% of resources only what they can achieve. That is not worth the imprisonment and the slavery of that individual. But also noting that there are individuals who want to go on with the system of the AI, but are betrayed and lied by the fact that they're not really good at the education. These people are stamped as failures, that they're flawed individuals because the AI told them to go on with it, but they're not really working in it. But they have faith in the system, but they're betrayed of it. And in our world, that's impossible. That doesn't happen because, they know that. It didn't work. They can just change schools or change jobs or things like that. But in a world of coercion and with the normalization that AIs are all natural, these people are flawed individuals, irregulars that the AI couldn't cope with. And that's when these individuals are denied of the existence of a legit being, and that's simply not worth the bit of the utilitarian calculus that they can achieve.
Thank you, member of government. So next, member of opposition. So next, government whip.
Clarification. First, opposition side have never talked to the moral value of individualism. Debaters, judges, you can't bring your individualistic libertarianism into this debate. As long as they have never talked to the moral value of individualism at all. There's literally no logical corroboration as to why individual idea is important, why maximization of individual duties is important to begin with, right? Neither of closing motion did that so far. Second of all,
they're very unfair in this debate. Why? Because first of all, they assume that AI is horrible, but at the same time, they believe that free will is somehow perfect magical tool and perfect agency, right? My partner already talked to you that in this free will is not a moral value. I'm going to extend this point as a rebuttal to both sides of the house. 3 points. First of all, let's assume some bad AI there. So what's the distinction between their side and our side? Second of all, let's talk about specifically free will. And third of all, to talk about the social utility and why that matters in this debate. Extreme rebuttal to closing motion. First of all, in the last section of his speech, Emil said, for example, so there will be people who will be regarded as irregular. I'm sorry, under their paradigm, more than 95% of people will take advice of this AI, right? It means that these people will be anyway seen as irregular people. For example, who do not take the recommendation by AI will be seen as irregular people under their paradigm. Two, their first extension is not extension because that's something already said by opening a position, right? That's why closing motion don't have much extension in this debate, right? Because opening motion already talked about how they can achieve some extent of utility in this space. CEO dies, I'm sorry for that. First point. What if AI is to some extent sexist or biased in this debate? First of all, open issue's idea that democracy will not be functioned, people cannot participate in politics. I'm sorry, these things are not relevant because we're not talking about an outcome of politics, right? As OG said, this is debate about outcome of lifestyle choices, university, corporation, that's irrelevant. But let's assume that there are contexts where AI says that, well, Muslim women have to stay in house, for example, right? First of all, in these horrible contexts, maybe these women would have to anyway take the advice from artificial intelligence, right? Because if women want to go against this artificial intelligence, surrounding people say, what are you doing? Because AI is correct, why are you going to take a mistake, right? Or second of all, many people believe that, well, the answer by AI is most productive, right? It means that if there are people who go against this productive advice for AI, people will be criticized, right? Because you who is going against this AI advice is going to be seen as a person who is going to create burden for your own society, who is not going to be a diligent person, who is going to be seen as a lazy person. But furthermore, according to the characterization by Elo, well, these artificial intelligence might be very, very, very authoritarian, right? It means that anyway people is going to buy into the idea advice from artificial intelligence. In the vast majority of cases, anyway, this rest of 5% people will be forced to take the advice from artificial intelligence. That's why their model, tested by open motion, is nothing different from our side of the house. But there are several differences here, right? First of all, for example, women who chose, because under their paradigm, there will be self-responsibility narrative. What do I mean with this, right? If women deliberately chose to stay in-house, that will be justified, right? Based upon their own discretion. Because people believe that, oh, women genuinely want to be in the housewife, for example, right? And that's why this accelerates discrimination, right? We have taught you from closing government uniquely that this is the only way to combat discrimination based upon sexuality or gender, for example, right? Because under our paradigm, we can simulate, for example, maybe this woman could be a good scientist, a good engineer, for example, right? At the point these women actually go to, for example, university, right? University, they're able to show their own talent, they're able to show the productivity, right? Even women are able to, for example, think in a logical way. Even LGBT exposure can perform well and defend our own country, right? This ability, performance, exposure with this ability is important to break down the discrimination happening on their paradigm. But under opposition's paradigm, these people's choices will be condemned, right? Because many minority people are so afraid not to take their recommendation from artificial intelligence. No thank you, and that's more important than mere individual self-actualization, right? How is that important? No explanation from their side of the house. No thank you. Second of all, the idea of free will. Two responses to the idea of free will. First of all, we deny the idea of free will to begin with, right? Because they have never talked to you why free will it does exist in the first place. If the world is deterministic, everything in phenomena is a result of causal chain. So A happened, B happened, C happened, D happened, right? There is no room for human free will to intervene in that situation. If the world is not deterministic, there is a randomness which is controlling our life, right? Randomness is not something we can control by our free will, right? They need to talk about the free will, why that exists in the first place, right? At least because of our extension, the moral value of freedom, free will is very, very dubious. Even they don't challenge. Opposition is too late to do so. No, thank you. Second of all, my partner will call to in rebuttal. This is very important. The assumption of their side of the house here is that maximization of individual utility is extremely important. No reason as to why that is true in the first place, right? Because Second, but furthermore, no, thank you. My partner already told you, for example, in entrance examination is a zero-sum game, right? Let's assume 10,000 people want to, based upon their free will, enter University of Tokyo. But anyway, only 3,000 people can enter University of Tokyo, right? That's why, if they respect free will, anyway, we have to deny some of people's free will in this world, right? We don't think that's a moral good value. Then what is important is a bit more utility, right? Maybe the utility we're talking about won't be that exclusively big under partner, but we think this has several impacts on our society. Why is this true? No, thank you. Closing.
So does the state exist for the individuals, or does the state exist for the AI's order, or some I don't know social utility?
No, we think the social utility create a ability for individual to self-actualize, for example, right? Because utility means that we have more of resources, which then, for example, we're able to save even 6 or 7 poor people's life. But that is important because, first of all, these poor people are able to can override a poverty line. But furthermore, they're able to use this money for self-actualization out of education, out of university. They can enjoy their entertainment, for example, right? That's why self-actualization, if that is important, can be achieved under a partner rather in this debate. But furthermore, the idea that that utility is not exclusive. But what if I is a very sucked student, I receive a huge amount of subsidy by the state, for example, right? At the point I try to waste this money that create harm to other people, even 3 or 4 people. Maybe that number is not that big, but in fact, these people deliberately chose to harm other people. They deliberately chose to waste resources which could have been saved for example, poor family is far more important. But furthermore, the idea that what we can crack down like social structure, like that's point information from open information to my partner. First of all, as I told you in my first point, we think that, we think state doesn't exist only for the maximization of individuals' utility, right? Because, for example, we have a taxation system which significantly reduces the freedom and choices of individuals. We constrict people in the case of war, right? We think social utility is some of the time important. Opposition side needed to logically talk about the moral value of freedom and will. You cannot take their argument just because they're libertarian or individualistic cases. I beg you to make a vote based upon logics, maybe not by AIs.
Thank you, Government Whip. So lastly, Opposition Whip, please conclude this debate.
Straight to summary, because I have many things to talk about. Firstly, individual choice, and secondly, social utility. Before us, some minor engagement to the closing government who died already yesterday. Firstly, they are saying people, at the end of the day, legalize people who don't make a decision which is recommended by the AI. But it's not the case in the reality. We know that AI makes mistake, as we already told you. We announce it if necessary. Human beings are not so intolerant towards people who take risks and errors. For example, to be musician or to be artist or to be comedian is very risky choices of individual. Without AI, we know that most of people cannot realize that dream. But we are tolerant for those people to take a risk that is simply happening outside of the house. Even though they don't take a choice that is recommended by AI, people will cheer up those kind of people. It's actually happening in outside of the house. Then they are saying gender discrimination can be solved by AI. They already agree 95% of people are following the recommendation by AI. But their logic is this, because women can self-actualize themselves and they can show their success story in a society, and that will solve the gender discrimination. Same mechanism is happening to a similar extent in the outside house, because 95% of women also follow the recommendation and they will make successful career in the outside house. That is enough to make the gender discrimination solved in the outside house. That is already nonsense in this debate. So firstly, individual choice. From Prime Minister, they are saying choice is invariant in the status quo because they don't have capacity and the community doesn't matter, is or somehow extended by closing government. Firstly, already we told you the community capability or rationality can be solved in our paradigm by revealing those kind of information by AI. And then suddenly they are saying, for example, closing government, they are saying the community is very problematic to restrict individual choices. The burden in this debate, in their side of the house, the individual will be always better off if they are coerced to take options. For example, please imagine the situation in Catholic communities. One individual is suggested that he will be best surgeon or doctor of abortion in that community. Is that actually better for those individuals to take that choice? Because that will destroy the relationship with your family, with your friends in that community. They have to put us. AI is making the best choices in most cases, Mr. Speaker, Madam Chair. And we recognize AI cannot quantify the level of religious beliefs or personal preference perfectly and compare it with the future career of themselves. AI cannot prove individual will be better even in their circumstances. And also, if in their circumstances, if individuals want to go away from their family and community, we are happy to provide a safe camp for those individuals to actualize themselves in their paradigm, as we told you already from a member of opposition. And we told you that AI causes errors sometimes. They wanted to avoid AI's limitation argument, but debate happens in a real world. And it's nonsense to assume AI is something like God, which knows your every single trivial future as destiny. It's impossible to forecast an individual who is talented to athlete will be somehow suddenly injured in a car accident. That kind of accident cannot be forecasted by the AI even in their side of the house. That's why their paradigm prohibits people who are suggested to be athlete from not taking risks to be injured in a car accident, because that kind of accident or unpredictable event will destroy your future career. Those kind of choices cannot be done in their side of the house. That's the burden they have to protect. And then they're saying normalization can happen. From Prime Minister, they try to say human beings in their world will not feel their freedom is deprived. But it's unfortunately not true. Even in the world, people have many opportunities to make a decision. What to eat today, what to go to pray today. Those people have their choices are not satisfactory. People naturally doubt that AI is actually capable, or even, especially in the case, individual unsatisfied with your life. They will be highly likely to doubt AI's decision and complain for that. That is the problem happening in the outside of the house. No, thank you later. And from closing government, they are saying individuality is not proven in the outside of the house. But we told you, clearly coming from a member position, states have to respect individual view, because people don't exist for people, as people don't exist for state, and states actually making the maximum benefit for individual. The people don't have to follow the state's order or dictatorship of AI. We told you already, some cannot go to University of Tokyo maybe, but it's their choice. After that future, you can reconcile with the AI if they want. That is the responsibility of individual, because they are the ones who are influenced by their every single important decision and outcome is influencing individual. States cannot take responsibility for that. That's why states have to respect individual choice in the world. That's why individual choice should be protected, especially when we are talking about education, occupation, that is so fundamentally important in their life. Opening.
So you assume that 90% will be somehow be happy. But when you criticize us in a world without choice and free will, that these people are going to be unhappy, how in your world, when these people have other choices and can see other jobs and have free choice, will they be satisfied with that 90% choice?
First, we told you, 90% of people think they are going to follow a recommendation by AI. We can reconcile with people 5%. What is the next best choice for individual to take? Well, those kind of considerations can be happen in their side of the house. And closing government, they are saying the subsidy for education, the subsidy for poverty is wasted in our side of the house. But we are happy, for example, to make individuals to return back their subsidy if they are quit their university. For example, we are happy to make those individuals pay the compensation for the loss to our society in the outside of the house. That's not the reason why the AI have to make individuals follow every single choice that AI has made. And also from opening government, they are saying utility for disenfranchised groups can be maximized in their side of the house. And they try to argue that AI will allocate resources more fairly than human free wills. And their trial will be provided with welfare, somehow black light will be progress. Firstly, if the choice to help disenfranchised people is clever choice to increase your GDP or net pipe resources, it is highly likely to happen even outside the house, accept that kind of recommendation in outside the house to maximize their own utility to help the poor and help the black light in outside the house. And also, Madam Chair, in many cases, their problem is not simply about the utility. For example, discrimination or misunderstanding in mind cannot be logically solved by some kind of enforcement by the machine in their side of the house. And thirdly, Madam Chair, more importantly, if redistribution of resources is of course is beneficial for the poor, but if this redistribution damages the social utility by some logical calculation of AI will rather influence the light of poverty, because the poor is a burden on society. If the AI judges that, the light of the individual, light of the poor will be more influence in the outside of the house. Madam Chair, individual choices should be respected by the state. That is the fundamentally important occupation, education, that is first and core of individual life in their life. Social utility doesn't matter in this debate, even though some difference is happening in social utility that doesn't justify the dictation of individual choice with the coercive AI. That's why I'm very proud of it.